Last week's guest on the Nutrition Heretic podcast was Dr. Shawn Baker, a supporter and practitioner of the carnivore diet. This week, we continue with Phil Escott, a fellow carnivore who dedicates his time spreading the word and saving vegans and vegetarians. In part 1 of our interview, we'll find out what he does, the contradiction that are vegan carnivores, and how to prevent diets turning into cults. This and much more, coming up next on the Nutrition Heretic podcast.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
If you're still confused about what to eat and not getting the results you thought you'd get by going organic, go to nutritionheretic.com and download the shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague for free. The shit list details what health food companies want you to believe about the crap they peddle and why the real foods they're meant to replace are far better. Stop letting big health food dump all over you and download the shit list today.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. Aloha and welcome to the Nutrition Heretic podcast. This is Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic, talking about her pet peeves today. If you've been listening since the beginning, you know that the one thing I hate more than anything is when somebody comes up to me and says, well, I believe in everything in moderation, which is total because, either they're eating a donut when they're saying it, or then they give me a rant about how every food under the sun is bad for you and you've got to, follow this strict whatever kind of diet and it works 100% for everyone because the planet is suffering if you eat meat and blah, 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 blah. Just a whole bunch of right? So that brings me to today's guest heretic, who is Phil Escott. And I met him originally, actually, in what I didn't realize at the time was his Facebook group. And he was talking about all the things that I'm always talking about, and just a lot of the BS that surrounds food and nutrition these days, not only from establishment, but also from so-called alternative nutrition or, more enlightened nutrition. So with that, welcome to the show, Phil.
Hey, Adrienne. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here, and I absolutely agree with you with the moderation thing. It drives me nuts too.
Yeah, I often say that is code words from doctors that they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think that moderation brings moderate results.
Well, thank you.
That's not what we want.
Right. And actually, and I don't even know if they're moderate because people are just going down in flames these days, aren't they? The moderation is kind of, it kind of means nothing. Oh, and by the way, the actual term, the actual phrase, translated from the Latin was moderation in all things, which I think has a slightly different, emphasis on that. Right?
Yes, I'm not really sure. I didn't pay much attention in Latin at school. I was mostly pea shooting at the back or something, So I didn't do very well in Latin.
Okay, so talk to me about because I sometimes I jokingly refer to myself as a nutrition philosopher because maybe it's my fault for allowing myself to get kind of caught up where most people seem stagnant in my mind, which is they get caught up in these trite little phrases that at the end of the day bring them nothing advantageous to their health. How do you categorize what you do?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I think that for many years, decades, I've been interested in this whole health, spirituality, diet, everything. What's really going on, and it took decades and a serious illness to uncover so much of the that's going on. And I think one of the best things that happened to me was getting really ill with psoriatic arthritis and not being able to move. And I think that took me to having to learn about so many aspects of health, because a lot of people, they can cure themselves just with a shift in diet or just with this or just with that. But for me, it wasn't. Every little thing that I did, I thought it was going to be the final solution, and it was just a little brick in a wall. And so I've had to learn so many things from so many disciplines, and I had to throw out so many things that I thought were useful. So these days, I guess I kind of cover everything. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I look into the whole emotional aspect of it, the spiritual aspect of it, the business of light and circadian biology, deuterium depletion, which is an interesting one, and carnivore diet as well. How insane do you have to be to just eat meat and fat? Everybody tells you that's dangerous, right? But
right.
No, it's in all the ways that I've worked with people with diet, it seems to be the most healing modality I've used there of all. So, a little bit of everything. Jack of all trades, I guess. Yeah, that's about it for me.
Right. Yeah. And, that's exactly my conundrum as well, because even though I call myself a nutrition philosopher or food philosopher, I guess it's because it's the only thing I can think of to kind of encapsulate all of these different areas, because once you get into it, you realize that it's more than just the diet, but it's the attitude towards everything in life, right? Including the diet. So, the diet obviously is extremely important, but it's, if you harbor a lot of anger, for example, and you're eating, let's say, carnivore diet, paleo, or, anything that is working for you, let's just say, it's not, it doesn't seem like a complete package.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think one of the reasons that I mention diet so much is because there's so much nonsense built up around it.
Yes.
It's the way to to talk to people about diet. You have to dispel so much brainwashing on so many levels that it takes such a long time. I have people come to me and you can say, sort out your light environment. This is how circadian biology works. This is how perhaps your cells aren't working properly because they're not getting the right light information for the right time of day. And they go, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, blue light can stop the melatonin cycle. All that. That's interesting. Oh, and just eat meat and fat. Don't be so crazy.
Right.
So then you've got to spend 2 weeks unpicking that before they realize that, yes, it is perfectly safe. So it's worth talking about, just because so many people have come before us and laid such a pathway of absolute crap that people have walked on for 100 years or so, particularly really since the 60s and 70s, when all this low fat nonsense came in. So, there's a lot of nonsense to unwind before you can actually get to a starting point with a lot of people that you try and help.
Right. Absolutely. And it's always the person who really needs your help, and then, they freeze up and they decide that they already know enough. They know that you're crazy, right? Because you're suggesting this. And back when I started with nutrition, I was just telling people just to add some kind of meat and fat back to their diet, and that was crazy. So, now going to this other level of what humans have evolved with, from day one, is really interesting. And before the podcast, I mentioned to you that I just came back from Japan about a month ago. And one of the things that I did there is I tried to uncover a lot of myths about the Japanese diet, because we're always being told, like, oh, they just eat vegetables and it's all low fat and they this and that, so it was just a lot of this BS. And of course, because they're Oriental, they cannot digest dairy. That's the thing that especially vegan people of to push that mantra. So I go there and I discover there is 6th century Japanese cheese. And, there's this cheese that they were making for hundreds of years, and it's unclear how it fell out of favor, but they're bringing it back now. There is also, I also uncovered in the same area, this was in Asuka, which is the first stable capital of Japan before Kyoto. And, we also had a soup that has goat milk in it. And that also goes back to the 6th and 7th centuries. So, like you said, there's just so much around diets and so much wishful thinking about what the diet should look like. And then, for those who don't travel, who don't get to see these parts of the world, they suck it up and they believe that this is true, right?
Oh, I know. It's crazy. I mean, there's this whole myth about the Okinawans, isn't there?
Yeah.
They all live to 100 and more, and they do that because they only eat vegetables. Well, if you look into it, you find that people who've lived with them, they know that they eat a hell of a lot of fish and pork.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't it be the pork fat that made them live a long time? But then again, it wasn't. It was all skewed because a load of their young men got killed in the war, which brought up the average age massively.
Exactly.
And they probably lived in a very low deuterium environment. They had they didn't have any EMFs. They didn't have any artificial light. They didn't have, they had good community there. There's so many factors. You can't just focus on the vegetables. Plus the fact that now I understand they're actually the shortest lived people in Japan, whereas the rest of Japan have started eating more meat. So it's clearly, I don't think there's this. I'm not one of these absolutists who'll suddenly say that meat helps you live to 100.
Right.
I don't know about that. There's so many other compounding factors. It's got nothing to do with that.
Absolutely. And I think that. But one thing I do believe about meat is that it does increase our resiliency to, in the face of a lot of the other stressors of life, which I don't think that all diets allow us to remain as grounded, let's say.
Exactly the word I was going to use. I mean, you just got to look at the vegans and for the first 3 months they might have great results. They come off an ordinary diet and they're cutting out a lot of the processed stuff, and so then they think that this is going to carry on, but then they get in trouble a little way down the line. And the one thing you do see is this snowflakery. They get very upsettable by everything.
Right.
They're always getting offended by this and offended by that. I've never seen a funny vegan. I see hundreds of them because they attack me and they give me death threats and say my kids should be taken away and all that. I've got a particularly aggressive vegan doctor at the moment who's telling me on Twitter that, telling everybody he's posting about me, saying that, I'm the greatest lowlife there's ever been. And I just tell him, I've been telling him that he's saying this because he loves me really, and he's just in denial about it. And I love him too and all that. And you just don't see anybody with a sense. I think if you eat that way, it kind of robs you of your sense of humor as well. I don't know what's going on, but something really strange is happening there. And they do believe that they have the moral upper hand, which if you look into it is also nonsense, Right. So, although the old thing of how many animals actually get killed for a vegan diet, and they do get very sick. I have this Facebook group, like you said, and there's 6,000 odd people on there. I only started it in January for 10 people, really, or thereabouts, and it seems to have grown like crazy. People are waking up to this carnivory thing. And a very large percentage of people on that group are ex-vegans, who ran into a lot of health problems. And I think because carnivore is so insane, in inverted commas, it takes a long time for people to get to it. So the people who get to it are normally very well educated in all other diets, whereas your average vegan has sort of Googled for 5 minutes and found a couple of propaganda films and and they think they're experts. And so, there are a lot of very, very well educated and very, very sort of stable emotionally and very hilarious people on that group. So it does seem to interfere with the mental processes, and you're unable to form an amusing statement, let's say.
Right. Well, I think what complicates it is the low fat angle as well. With a lot of vegans, because perhaps if they ate more fat, there would be a little something to latch onto. But a lot of my vegan friends, unfortunately, they're on these super restrictive low fat diets, low salt, and really just no flavor at the end of the day, nothing to actually satisfy the palate. When you said that, the reason why I laughed so loud is because I think you're right. I never, never really thought of it that way, but you may have something there.
Well, yes, it's not only that, but also the aggression that comes about, which is very strange. A friend of mine mentioned that it's probably because they're in hunting mode. They haven't made a kill for.
That's a good one. That's a good way of looking at it.
Not far from the truth, maybe,
right?
Because their bodies are trying to tell them something. It's funny, I used to say let's not do any of this vegan bashing, and I really have no problem with vegans individually. It's just the whole dogma of it, I think, is really getting people into trouble. And I'm not really a conspiracy theorist in other ways, but if you look at it, you can see how much the whole veganism thing is playing into the hands of big agriculture and in turn big pharma.
Absolutely.
And so it's in their interests to keep it going,
Absolutely. Especially, sorry to cut you off, but especially when you look at these like fake meats that are becoming like, this bleeding burger and stuff that's made out of beets. You know what I'm talking about, right? But yeah, I don't see how any of that, any stuff made in a laboratory, grown in a laboratory in a petri dish, is in any way more sustainable on our planet than grazing some cattle and pigs.
No, it's also there's one thing nobody ever takes into account on that is going to be grown under blue light.
Right.
It's the cells are not going to be developing properly. It's not going to be like it is from a cow. It's a funny thing, but they always seem to be looking for ways, don't they, to eat meat, veggie burgers, this, that, and I often point out to them that there's nobody I know tries to make broccoli out of steak,
Well, it's funny because in one of the carnivore groups, I said, has anybody? No, somebody came back and he had a little joke, and actually, I'm wondering now if he mentioned your name, but I said, this is are there any vegans trying to be vegan carnivores? Are you aware of that? No, because it seems like no matter what, you go paleo and they're like, well, I'm vegan paleo, and keto, I'm vegan keto. So, is there some warped attempt to become vegan carnivores?
I don't know. Maybe I just think that they're not listening to their bodies.
Yeah.
They're not listening to their bodies. If they really understood, I've seen vegans when they get very sick and, they start to realize that the whole environmental side of it was nonsense as well. And there's a big wave of embarrassment. There's a lot of almost deprogramming you have to do with them, where you have to point out that the soil's being depleted, the land's being raped for this. Their initial argument, of course, is it's all fed to the animals. And what they don't realize is this is something we could come together on. The animals shouldn't be fed a load of soy.
Right.
They should be back on the land. They should be pooing all over the place, and they should be restoring the soil just as nature intended. But there's nothing in veganism that is particularly close to nature. 99% of these vegans have never been to a farm.
Thank you. They're all city dwellers, right?
Yeah. They live under blue light. They live in some high-rise apartment. They're watching blue light all the time. They're surrounded by Wi-Fi. They've seen a couple of propaganda films, and they eat donuts.
Well, I was thinking about this earlier, which is that unfortunately many of the people who I know who, when they first go vegan, not only are they on the standard American diet, but they're usually on some have serious addiction issues, whether to alcohol or hard drugs. And
yes.
And, going from, so eating donuts is not really hard when you've been an alcoholic already, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's a whole load of strange things about it. I just see people, the things that I see unwound from veganism. There's so many disaster stories on YouTube now.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was talking to a vegan on Twitter the other day, or maybe my YouTube channel. I can't remember. I get so many attacks, but every now and again, if they don't actually start off shouting in capitals, I'll engage a bit, And I was pointing out the enormous amount of disaster stories of vegans coming over from veganism and telling their story of all sorts of IBS and depression and muscle wastage and God knows what. And he just flat out said, well, they're all paid by the meat industry to lie. And it's really weird.
I've heard that.
It's such a strange thing. I get accused of that. I keep saying, "Please hook me up." If they can find somebody to pay me for saying this, that would be great. But nobody pays me. It's just so rewarding. It's so rewarding when you can see the amount of ailments that are unwound. As my good friend Amy Van Ostend, who is a carnivore as well. She has her own group. She has Healthy Curiosity, and she says it's funny how many of the problems blamed on meat and saturated fat completely disappear when all you eat is meat and saturated fat.
Right.
All the lies, let's not call them lies, but myths have come about from strange studies done on people who eat all the burger buns with the burgers and drink the Coke and have the fries, and there is no study done, not since the 30s anyway, on somebody who eats fully carnivore.
Exactly. Yeah.
But now the tide, they say, anecdotes are useless, but the tide of anecdotes, when you get anecdotes in the tens of thousands, you can no longer ignore them. They have more validity to me than any randomized controlled trial that vegans always shout for.
Right.
So there's no agenda there. Nobody's selling anything. Nobody's selling a product. Nobody's selling anything. They just come with their stories, and most of these people can really compare the diets because they've been through everything. Mm-hmm. And then finally they come to paleo usually, and then they come to a ketogenic diet. And then the miracles that happen, particularly in the more complex diseases, when the last of the vegetables are cut out and the intestinal permeability kind of seals up.
Right.
It's amazing. They're showing this. I don't know whether you're aware of the work they're doing at Paleomedicina in Hungary.
No.
Where Zofia Clements and Csaba Tart. I'm really looking forward to meeting Zofia. We've got a carnivore retreat in Spain at the end of April. So anyone who's listening to this.
End of April? Okay.
End of April in Spain. Come along if you can. Honestly, Adrian, come along. We've got Zofia Clements speaking. We've got Paul Mabry, the Zero Carb Doc, coming over from the States. We've got some really, really funny people. I know there's some hilarious people from my Facebook group and other ones coming. It's going to be really a lot of fun. There's 6 great speakers and 5 great speakers plus me, let's say. But there's some really cool people. But anyway, the work that Zofia Clements and Csaba Tart are doing in Hungary is amazing. They get people to drink this substance that goes through the intestinal wall pretty easily into the bloodstream, so they can test the permeability, and they can see pretty easily by testing the blood how permeable the gut is, and they're just showing absolutely with science, proper science, that the gut doesn't heal up while there's any vegetable matter left. So that's often why people run into problems with these complex diseases. If somebody eats a ketogenic diet with a load of leafy green veg and broccoli and whatever and onions, and they're probably never going to break their whole life. So they'll say vegetables are healthy, but I would say that they'll probably stay healthy despite the vegetables, not because of them.
Right.
And so when you get somebody who's really sick, who's broken themselves on donuts and Twinkie bars and pizza and stuff, they've lost their vegetable privileges very often, and they can't seal the gut until they get rid of all plant matter, and that is such blasphemy. This is a great name of your podcast, the heretic aspect of it. Because it really is, what we're saying here is horrendous heresy, and it creates tremendous religious fervor against it. But it's funny when I get all these messages. It was amusing me this morning because I was getting these messages from this vegan doc, getting really wound up and angry. And then on my messenger, I was getting messages, like multiple messages saying, I can't believe it, what I've got from your YouTube channel, the work I've done with you, and I've reversed this and I've reversed that, and my IBS has gone and skin issues have gone, diabetes disappeared, and you're like, it's so weird to read the two types of messages that I get.
Right.
Very strange.
Yeah. So, because, like you said, we both have vegan friends. We, as individuals, wonderful people. As a movement, let's call it, to me, it's more of a cult. How
Absolutely.
does one stay in something as extreme? And it is, for all intents and purposes, it is extreme to only eat meat, right? How do we keep that from becoming a cult? Because I see in many carnivore groups and paleo groups and ketogenic groups that people getting extremely dogmatic about that as well. How do we balance that? How do we, stay true to what is working for us without, like you said before, saying that this is going to, make everybody live to be 100 or what have you.
I've got so many strange angles on that has just occurred to me. Let's see if I can remember them all. I think the first thing is that humans really love community. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's really anything wrong with everybody going, hey, yeah, we're all meat eaters. People love to be in it.
That's fine.
So that's cool. But I'm not seeing yet any aggression towards individuals, which is what I don't like. I don't see anybody. I see people lightheartedly taking a piss out of somebody like Michael Greger, because he really is spouting some nonsense, and he's getting so skinny. I mean, I saw a picture of him sitting next to a 9-year-old girl the other day, and she had bigger arms than him, and has he actually seen what's going on there? Yeah. So, light-hearted piss-taking and whatever, I have no problem with. I don't like the personal attacks, and vegans are very, very good at that. They love the personal attacks. So as long as it's not getting that far, I don't mind the sort of community and sort of say, that's just human nature. So I've not seen it go that far. I've only thrown a few people off the group. I'm pretty lenient, with that one. And they're usually just people who end up with some personal attack, and it's usually about some nonsense. There's people like that in all walks of life, but generally, I would say, there's 10% maybe of carnivores who might be capable of that, and probably, a bigger percentage I wouldn't like to guess at with vegans, because I can't see how many are being nice, because I don't frequent the groups too much. I used to go in and look just to see if they are healing, and they don't really appear to be. Right. So, and I did have another point on it, but that's escaped me. Maybe it'll come back in a bit.
Okay, well, maybe after my follow-up question, because how carnivore are you? Like, what do you eat? Because I've tried the carnivore diet, and I don't get very far because I just love all different kinds of food. I can eat mostly meat, like 90% meat, but there's just what happens is I get very bored and then I stop eating. And then that's not good. So, okay. So, yeah. Well, so,
I think you brought up a real interesting point there, because you're in Hawaii. Yeah. Yeah. So you're in the sun. Yeah. And you can eat a lot more different things than I can in England. Nature knows best. You go with nature, really. I am 100% carnivore. I don't eat anything from the plant kingdom. Well, maybe a little bit of dark chocolate now and again. That's the nearest I would get to the plant world. Mm-hmm. But I when I dropped the last of the veg out, I found a great improvement in body composition, in mental clarity, in inflammation. There was very few places left in my body I had inflammation, but little niggles here and there sort of calmed down beautifully. Mm. And it's I think at this point, to explain that, I'll have to bring up this business of circadian biology and deuterium. Mm-hmm. Because for anyone who's listening on this who isn't familiar with the concept of deuterium, it's very simple. There's an extra sort of isotope on hydrogen. It's called deuterium, and it creates heavy water if there's a lot of deuterium on the hydrogen in water. And our mitochondria, the little engines that in the mitochondria that spin in our cells and create our energy, our ATP, which is at the root of everything really on a physical level. I think you can go even more subtle than that, but for the moment, let's do the physical.
Right.
And their main job is to create water. And they create their own deuterium-depleted water, which is the kind of fuel that the body likes. It likes the water to not be heavy water, because then the cell gets good redox potential. It can turn over its what do you call it? Its toxins and whatever much more easily. And at that point, the body will run smoothly. If you have too much deuterium, which is growth, it's great for kids, it's good in the womb, it's in fruit, it's something that promotes growth. It's not evil in itself. But if you have too much deuterium in the body when it's older, then what do you get? You get obesity, you get cancer, the cells go crazy. So the lowest deuterium diet you can get is meat and fat. If you're running on animal fats, on saturated fats, you're actually creating deuterium-depleted water in the cells. Now, a lot of people find that when they go to a carnivore diet, they drink a lot less water because the fats actually hydrate us in the same way that a camel hydrates itself from its hops. And camels are so good at creating deuterium-depleted water, they don't actually age. They just drop dead and you can't really tell how old a camel is. So this is the same with us. But if we get a backup of deuterium from a high deuterium diet, which is all the carbohydrates, the grains, some of the leafy green veg are very low deuterium in the plant. But the trouble is that they can be a problem for people with intestinal permeability, autoimmunity, because they have a lot of other things, the fibers, the oxalates, the salicylates. There's a lot of poisons in veg that can be a problem. But just on the deuterium level at the moment, if you're eating a lot of fruit and you're in an environment that stops the cell turning over these toxins and creating its own deuterium-depleted water, if you're confusing the cell with artificial light, with Wi-Fi, with stress, with all of these factors in the modern world, and you're eating a high deuterium diet, it's going to be an absolute perfect storm for disease.
Right.
So this is why there's that beautiful secret of eating a low deuterium diet in the north, in the winter, when you do. And that's why nature, you just got to look back at nature. What's so beautiful about deuterium, the deuterium theory, is that it not only ties in with pretty much the way that everybody's got well from any chronic disease, whether they know it or not, but by fixing those factors. But it also, the people who are working with people with the cancer patients now, just mopping up cancer. We cured my own mum's breast cancer. I've got a little video on YouTube with pictures of that, where you can see the horrible tumor about to come through the skin just disappearing.
Oh man!
And we did that with my mum at 93 years old.
Wow.
And that was cool, when I wasn't aware of it actually at the time, but now I see it, it was all down to deuterium depletion, and that allows the body to reabsorb all that, and turn over and create healthy new cells in place of the cancer ones. Now, if you just look at that, you've got the healing that we've all experienced. You've got the way that the doctors are fixing this cancer beautifully with deuterium depleted water. Excuse me. And you've also got nature. If you look at nature, you can see how it's a great lens to look at nature through, because if you've not got the factors that deplete deuterium, like sunlight, enough sunlight, that's why fruit grows in the summer and at the right latitudes, and you won't get so much fruit if you're an Inuit as you will if you live on the equator or in Hawaii or whatever. And so it's much safer for you to eat that kind of fruit, and you can have a much more varied diet than I can. And then if you look at somebody's inflammatory history and where they live, if they're living in a high-rise apartment in the north of England and they're under blue light and they're eating a high deuterium diet, they're going to be full of deuterium. Something's going to pop at some point. But you've got your feet on the ground, and you're in the sun, and you've got the sun on your body, and you're grounded, and you're not stressed, and you're not staring at television screens at night, and you've got your face in a mobile phone. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't pick some fruit off the tree and eat it, and so there's no hard and fast dogmatic rules. I think is this, yes. And this brought me back actually to my other point about dogmatic carnivores. If you see it through a lens like that, you can see that there are no hard and fast rules. They kind of change. If somebody comes to me with some autoimmune problem, then yes, for a while there might be some hard and fast rules. But after a while, you can start listening to their body and just figure out what nature would be doing at this latitude, in this season, and with an eye to their inflammatory history. And then, with a little bit of common sense, when you learn a few things like this, you can fix your own body. It makes me a little bit embarrassed that I spent years and years learning about all these weird things like Ayurveda and herbs and this and that, when really it could be possible to just explain to somebody how to be healthy in about 5 minutes.
Right. and then what do you do with the rest of the session?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're the only species stupid enough to argue about diet. I mean, do you get lions going, do you know what? I think we should have a bit of tofu today. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it?
Well, if you listen to one of my earlier interviews is with Leah Keith, and she is the author of the Vegetarian Myth. And she said the last time she went on a vegan group, because she was vegan for 22 years, and about 3 months into it, I think she stopped having her period, and it, just went downhill from there. She said there were days where she would just start screaming at, because she lost her keys. She would just have these total mental breakdowns over the smallest things. And she said the last time she went on this after she had started eating meat again, and actually, interestingly enough, it came through a doctor of Oriental medicine, from China. And he was like, you can't eat like that. He's like, the big fish eats the little fish. So she goes home with a can of tuna fish and a plastic fork and she starts eating. So she's on this vegan group, and these vegans are one guy says, I was watching this documentary about, I think it was hyenas, eating whatever other animal, and the lion and what we need to do is that's barbaric. We need to separate all the animals by species and in big cages, essentially, so they won't eat each other. And people are like, yeah, and they're like, they'll just eat the grass if we keep them separate.
Oh, it's hilarious, isn't it?
Yeah, then the other person comes in, they're like, yeah, I see my cat eating grass. I bet this will work. And she was like, what? This is just too much for me. And she said she never went on another vegan group after that.
I know. She's cool, actually. It's a funny old thing with her, because she has got every point that every vegan needs to listen to, except that as soon as they hear her name, I mean, my God, the things that I've heard her called by vegans, it's unbelievable, because she's really putting across some great information, and she's got all they need, really, to put the piece of the puzzle together. But they just dismiss her by saying, oh, she ate bits of chicken now and again. I forget what it was she ate, bits of fish or something that she was eating periodically, and they go, oh, so she was never vegan. But to me, this is irrelevant, because if you're eating a vegan diet and you eat a bit of chicken once a month, it makes no difference at all. Did you hear about this study that, to me, is still just a really high deuterium diet? Did you hear about this wonderful study where they got a group of people and they fed them just oysters because they wanted to see how well the zinc levels came up in the body with oysters?
No, I didn't see that one.
And then they got another group of people where they gave them oysters and black beans, just that. So the group that just had oysters, their zinc levels shot up, and the group that ate oysters and black beans, their zinc levels didn't change. So there's this factor of the anti-nutrients in all these crazy foods that stop the uptake of nutrients. So from I mean, I know that they say, oh, well, vegan's a lifestyle, so she was never vegan, so because she ate a bit of chicken, so I'm not going to listen. But really, the gold dust information in there is that it was the other crap that she was eating that made the little bits of chicken or whatever she was having absolutely useless, or eggs, or whatever, So I see it up here. I live in a sort of a TM, a sort of transcendental meditation community. It's something I don't really have anything to do with anymore, but they live near here, and a lot of friends I've known since the mid-'80s, and I see them decaying enormously. They're really going downhill, and then the Ayurvedic doctors will come along, and even they say to them, for goodness sake, start eating some meat.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big myth, right, about Ayurveda. Yeah. And I think that was one of the other videos of yours I saw.
Big myth about Ayurveda, that it's vegetarian. It's nonsense. And so they eat a bit of meat, nothing really happens. And then they probably had difficulty digesting it, so they say, no, that's proof it's even more evil. When really the magic happens when you take all the rest of the crap out, and then the gut can heal. You're never going to take up the nutrients with a shredded gut from years of eating rice and dal, and chapatis and wholemeal bread and all of that sort of crap. So, but because people have been brainwashed to think that it's unholy, it's unspiritual, you're never going to wake up, you're never going to get enlightened if you eat meat, and all of this absolute rubbish. So it kills people. It's actually draining them. I've lost a lot of friends to cancer. Last year, 2 of my friends died of cancer on the same day.
Oh, geez.
From this community, and they sincerely believe that what they're doing is healthy. And occasionally I'll run into one in the supermarket. They say, God, you look so healthy and you were so sick. How did you do it? And I'll point to my trolley and then point to theirs. And they go, oh, well, I could never eat that. I go, well, fair enough. You carry on, and one by one your teeth will fall out. And it's I sound kind of savage on that, but it's because I really care about this. And I think that the whole spiritual community has really duped people. I think that's, as well as the governments and the big agriculture companies and everybody, it's also the spiritual type of dogma that's leading people astray on this and taking their health away. It's very difficult for people like me to battle against that. I wish I could just have people come on with a clean slate, and you can say, right, eat this, try this, get your light sorted, get out in the sun, get your feet on the ground, take up some meditation, get rid of the stress and whatever. And but it's very, very difficult, because you've got to just pick away and unwind all this ridiculous that people have got in their heads, and that's where the problem lies.
Yeah, and I do think that a lot of this comes from the fact that people aren't following, what were the Western religions, for example, at least in this part of the world, right? Whether it's Judaism, Catholicism, not so much Islam, but people don't really have that sense of community anymore, is what I'm getting at, and we're looking for these, and especially now with, so many disturbing things coming to light about many of these religions, people are going towards these Eastern type religions and things that seem to maybe offer something that those other religions never really did anyway. But somewhere along the way, it got hijacked by this concept that you have to give up meat, and you got to give up fat, and you got to do all of those. You have to meet certain criterion to fit in.
Yeah, I know. But it's very strange.
But
it's a good point. Good point about people looking for alternative religions. Yeah, and then they come to veganism too, which is actually a religion.
Right. Yeah.
This concludes part 1 of our interview with Phil Escott. Join us next week when we discuss subjects like, can a banana be considered paleo? How hard is it to travel around the world eating only meat? And how much meat does he eat per day? All this and much more on the next Nutrition Heretic podcast.
The Nutrition Heretic podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nikola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean. And our operations manager is Michelle Med. I'm your host, Adrian Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at the new and improved nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic, and on Twitter @NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher.